treat people fairly, but that doesn't mean treat them the same.
Right.
So in any organization, there's a number of high flyers that you're going to treat different. There's the average guy who comes in and does a solid job for you, or gal that does a solid job for you, you're going to treat a certain way. And then there's people who don't really do what they're supposed to do, who are going to get treated a certain way. As long as you treat each of those groups fairly, you'll probably be fine. But that doesn't mean that they get equal treatment,
Right.
which is a different concept together. So I kind of developed that over time. And then I learned early on, probably as a lieutenant, that not to just go to my high flyers for everything. Because what happens is it's very easy to overburden people who are doing an excellent job at something and just go to them all the time and kind of ignore everybody else. And that's not going to work for you either.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually got that same advice from my dad. He was a lieutenant at my department, and I still to this day use him. I think he's been retired 5-6 years now, but I'll hit, now that I'm a supervisor, I'll hit I'm like, fuck, I don't know what to do here. And he basically told me almost word for word. He's like, fair doesn't mean equal.
Right.
And equal doesn't mean fair necessarily. So he's like, for that person, does this match or does this match? He's like, so you have to go down that line. And I think I've always done that naturally, not knowing until I heard somebody put it into words. I'm like, oh shit, I've kind of been doing that. So I'm happy with the decisions I've made.
Yep.
But when somebody was able to put it into that perspective, now I can focus on it. I'm like, okay, I do have a person that is doing what's required, not necessarily going above and beyond or anything like that, but they like to call off all the time. They like to do this. They like to do that. Is what I'm doing still fair?
Yep.
Yeah, it's fair. I think it's fair for what you're putting out.
Yep.
And I agree with that. And then I've got my guys that are just, I got guys that are ate up with police work. It's fun. It's fun to have.
Yeah. You don't even have to think about them.
Yeah.
You just have to make sure they don't go too far off the fence.
Yes. Yeah. I do. I got some guys that I'm like, take a day off.
Yep.
Like, I understand that we're giving overtime and that you can take this day. It doesn't mean you have to. I'm trying to step back, but that's something I'm trying with the way you explain what is fair, what is equal, brought me into the mindset of like trying to get some of these cops to step back and like value why you do this. Police work isn't you. It's just something you do.
Yeah.
And since you've stepped away from police work, what has that transition been like?
Well, fairly early on as a deputy chief, I think I only served in like a normal division for about 4 or 5 months. I got promoted I think it was right in August, and I made it till Christmas. So right in January, there was a transition. And the transition was for me to run technology. And really what the chief asked me to do was find a new technology for the real-time crime center because we were having a problem doing some camera integration work.
What year did that start?
So I got promoted in August of 2020, so I probably went there in January of 21.
Okay, so this is fairly fucking recent. So
Yeah.
is that when you guys were getting a real-time crime center going, or had you had one established?
We'd had one since 2011, but the backline
Holy
technology for it, I think we were one of the very first.
Okay.
I think the backline technology for it had been corrupted in the ransomware attack in 2018.
What's the ransomware attack?
So the city of Atlanta had a ransomware attack and basically ruined the entire city of Atlanta network. And so obviously the real-time crime center at the time was on the standard city of Atlanta network.
So they're trying to blackmail you?
Oh yeah, they wanted I wasn't part of the negotiations, but they wanted X amount of Bitcoin to fix the whole thing. And
It's pretty smart.
yeah, I'm guessing we didn't pay them because nothing got fixed. We ended up just restarting an entirely new network.
Okay.
So we lost some things. And one of the things we lost, which at that time, it wasn't called Real-Time Crime Center software. It was called a PSIM. And I can't remember what PSIM stands for, but we were using a PSIM to bring cameras together made by Genetech.
Okay. Genetech's a company that has
Real-Time Crime Center software, which
Gotcha.
I can't remember what their solution's called anymore. We would end up going in a different direction, but that had been corrupted. And so we didn't have a way to bring our external cameras in. So basically cameras we don't own, right? We could see the cameras we owned and a select number of the cameras that were previously integrated, but we were missing a bunch of things. And so really what he asked me to do was find a solution for this. And then I took that job and I spent 6 months working really hard to learn how to understand all the things the nerds that came to my office talked about every day. So like, I didn't know what an API was, which for those of you that don't know, it's a way to connect one piece of software to another piece of software. But at the end of the day, like they would throw terms at me in these meetings and I didn't understand what the hell they were talking about, because if you're not really tech forward, you don't really understand all of these concepts. And so I spent a lot of time learning the job, like 6 months of really being willing to raise my hand and go, I don't understand what you're talking about. Explain it to me like I'm a fifth grader.
Yeah.
And then once I had a pretty decent feel for what was going on and the things that they were talking about, then making some pretty solid, what I felt like were solid decisions. So I completely revamped the technology in the Real-Time Crime Center. I completely redid our contract with Axon, which included unlimited third-party public safety data storage, which is a huge issue for most police agencies, as they don't have enough storage for all the evidence that they collect digitally.
Right.
And then the final thing I bought, obviously, is the company that I now work for, which is Peregrine. And I bought that to bring, siloed data into one common operating picture that you can make actual operational decisions from.
So how did you how did you come to the conclusion to find a software company like Peregrine to do that?
So it was funny. I had been asked to give a presentation on behalf of another company called Fusus, which I had also bought to solve my camera problem. But And I was very happy with their software, and every once in a while they would ask me to speak at a conference. So the conference that I went to was out in Elk Grove, and I was going to give a presentation on Atlanta's instance of Fusus. Now, obviously, I had bought the vendor, so I felt very positive about them, and I was more than happy to do it. And I wasn't really there looking for anything. So I was pretty familiar with the real-time crime space, and I had never heard of this company Peregrine previously. So I didn't even know that to expect to see something like it. And the guy didn't demo the software. So the guy who gave the 15, 20-minute spiel on Peregrine's behalf was a guy named Lenny Nerbetsky. He's my coworker. He's a retired New Jersey State Police captain. He kind of just told a story. And the story was intriguing enough that on the break, I walked over to him and I'm like, I actually want to see the software. So he demoed it in the lobby of when Elk Grove's obviously not a big city in California. So you're at like this senior rec center right across from like the city pool. So we're literally sitting in like a cafeteria table for this thing. And he's demoing the software. And there were two things that were striking about the demo. The technology was unbelievable, but he was demoing live production Albuquerque data. So it wasn't canned in any way.
Right.
Like you were going to see any flaws because you're using live data to do this. And when you can take 20 disparate data systems, everything from CAD, RMS, Flock, video, ALPR, Genetec ALPR, which we have there, shot spotter data, homicide database, gang database, repeat offender database. We put a bunch of systems into this thing. And then for, Eric Levine to show up and all of the data connected to him, no matter what system it's in, and for all of it to be coded to that Eric Levine, and then you know everything you need to know. So in the example you were giving to me before, let's imagine that you're one of those dudes who's got 3 baby mamas. We're going to have, if you've been known to be at those addresses, or there was some report written or maybe an ALPR in front of one of their houses, we're going to know you hang out at those 3 addresses because there's going to be information about that.
Right.
Right. So now you don't need the cop who's just the one guy who can remember all the places Eric Levine hangs out.
Yeah.
You just run a quick Google search for Eric Levine and it goes, well, we know these phone numbers are associated with him. These addresses are associated with him. And, and when you can do that around person data, you can do it around cases. So then you can do crime analysis workflows and you can do dashboarding around that. So we could build you a dashboard that basically said, here are all your known gang members, here are all the places they hang out, here's a map of the places they hang out. The technology can do so much that I've never gone somewhere yet, and I've been demoing the product since July, since that's when I retired. I took the job in July. I never go to a police agency where they don't think it's cool.
Yeah.
It always comes down to, it's really cool, we got to figure out how to fund it.
Yeah.